Well, welcome back to Performance Talk. My name is Joel Gordon, and my partner today is, as always, Chris Costa, but he is back from the beyond. Chris, welcome back. Glad to have you, man. I'm sure everybody will look forward to hearing from you as much as they normally do anyway.
Probably just my parents, honestly. But,
Just your parents.
They're the only opinions that matter.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, our guest today, Chris, and I'm taking your normal spiel, but our guest today is Thomas Shepard, renowned author, yada yada yada. You know of Tom?
No, I actually don't.
Yeah. So
I like to hide in the shadows, so I'll take that as a compliment.
Tom, tell us about yourself and what you're doing right now, so our audience will know, and so we catch Chris up.
Yeah, sure. So I've been a strength coach now for probably 12, 13 years. I started out just as like a PT in a commercial gym, as most people do, straight out of university. I had done an S&C like internship program when I was at university studying biology for my degree. So I came out with an S&C certification and then decided that coaching was the route I wanted to go with my career. I specialized in marine biology and quickly learned that getting a well-paying job, sustainable job in that field, isn't easily done. So I went down that route. I'd been training.
So you jumped to strength and conditioning?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's the next logical step, right? At that point, I've been
Yeah.
training since I was like 14 anyway. And after about 5 or 6 years of coaching, my wife and I had started a powerlifting team in the UK that was doing well. We had already been competing for a couple of years at that point anyway. And that was when I hired Christian Thibodeau as a coach, because he was someone who was a huge influence on my coaching methodologies and how I kind of viewed coaching. And it kind of knitted together from there in that he saw how I was using his methods with my powerlifters, and he was interested in that. So I started working with Christian and his company then. And then that led to me becoming head coach at Tib Army, running their online coaching services. Christian and I then co-authored a book together, which is called The Overload System for Strength, which is out now. You can buy it on Amazon and from Human Kinetics. And then eventually my wife got an invite out to Ohio to be on the Table Talk podcast with Dave Tate, because she had just become the UK's best ever powerlifter, like pound for pound, by coefficient, by dot score and all that. And she was sponsored by Elite FTS UK. So we came over to Ohio to meet Dave and do the podcast. We made a bunch of video content whilst we were out here, which went down really well with Dave. So then we made another trip out to Ohio next year for 3 months to spend more time filming some content with them. And it went down well enough that Dave wanted to make it a more permanent fixture. So now, on top of being head coach at Tib Army and running that, I'm also now at Elite FTS, being there, making educational content, helping out with the podcast and all that type of thing. So it's been a whirlwind, kind of like maybe 3 or 4 years. If you told me 3 years ago I'd be doing all of this stuff, I probably would have told you you're an idiot. But it's been a very cool experience to be able to work directly with two of the people that were the biggest influences on my coaching methodologies and my coaching education coming up. So now to kind of be working side by side those individuals on a daily basis is a really incredible experience, something I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, we're gonna talk to Chris Thibodeau a little bit later in our schedule. We tried to get him on earlier, but you know how schedules go.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, so let's talk about how you did use what Chris was giving you as a guide with your athletes.
Sure. So I've been reading. I mean, I was one of those guys that was on like the T Nation and the bodybuilding.com forums, like reading every post that like every coach put up and that type of thing. And the thing that kind of resonated with me with Christian's work was that it was so varied, and that he didn't really plant his flag in the sand that there was ever one single best way to do everything. Like, I mean this with all due respect to other coaches, but like you take, for example, someone like Jim Wendler, he's 531 is a fantastic program, and that's what he promotes, and he's done very well out of that, and fair play. But I liked Christian's experimental approach of going in all these different directions of different populations that appealed to me. So the main thing that I really started implementing from him with my powerlifters was his OCTS system, which is like a variation on Carl Dietz's triphasic system, where you have eccentric focus days, isometric focus days, and concentric focus days. So like slow tempos, pauses, and all this type of thing. And you can wave in different methods in the accumulation, intensity phases, and all that type of thing. And the thing that I found when I started using that with powerlifters specifically was just that they were able to work hard at a high intensity on compound lifts more regularly. So they were training their whole body 3 days a week, which traditionally they wouldn't be able to recover from. But more importantly, their motor control, their technique, and their injury occurrence just absolutely improved massively. Now, most of the powerlifters that me and Naomi coach now, once we started implementing those kind of methods, not that we use them 100% of the time, but the worst thing we generally have to deal with now in competition prep is like a bit of tendonitis here and there. And, stuff like that is inevitable, right, when you're going through that kind of preparation. So it was really like a huge light bulb moment to allow our lifters to train the main movement patterns. They don't have to be the competition lifts, but training a kind of squat, a kind of hinge, a kind of press at higher frequencies, at higher volume, without any kind of degradation in their recovery, and just generally improved results and being able to train harder at higher volumes for longer, which obviously is going to allow us to get better results. And I think that was the main thing that I integrated, that Christian kind of coined onto, that he thought was interesting. And that's kind of when he started to integrate me more into the company as like the powerlifting coach of Tib Army, if you like, and going at it from that side.
One of the things that you alluded to there and kind of sped past was transferability. You don't have to do the competition lift every day or every other day, but what you do has to transfer to that. So you have 100%. To do some kind of press, some kind of hinge, some kind of squat. And that's for me, and Chris and I have talked about this a lot. I've always said there's no one right way to do anything with one athlete.
Absolutely.
You got to take each athlete as an individual, and you have to then build your program. Your program has to be flexible enough to be built around them. It can't be, this is the way you do it, and the only way it's right.
Sure.
Because while and we'll get into that with Thibodeau a little bit later, but the way you use his methodology may be different than the way someone else uses it.
Yeah, 100%. And then even with the same athlete over time, your approach will need to change. And like, for example, my wife Naomi, I've been pretty much coaching her since we started dating like 13, 14 years ago, and she's gone from strong lift 5x5 to all-time world record holder. That's a huge spectrum to move through there, right? And how her training looks now compared to then is totally different. When she broke her all-time world record, she was training once every 6 days, and that was something that me and Christian came up with, because at that point her absolute loads are so high that she couldn't recover in time if she was training more frequently than that. It was actually better for her to do all the competition lifts in one day, which was brutal, admittedly, but then give herself 5 entire days to rest, recover, adapt, etc., and go from there. But like an approach like that would be totally unnecessary for her 2 or 3 years prior. For example, like her prep looks different for every competition, and I think what you're saying there about the difference between athletes, there can be as much variation between an athlete in the intermediate stage and the advanced stage as there can between two entirely different people. And that's something that coaches maybe need to take into consideration more too.
That makes sense, specifically from the developmental stage to the intermediate stage, because at the developmental stage they're a big block of clay.
Yeah.
When they have been developed to a certain degree and they reach that intermediate level of training, and their training IQ goes up a little bit, their physical IQ goes up a little bit, they're different than that gangly 13 or 14-year-old who couldn't get from the platform back to the backstage area during the competition without stumbling around. So
yeah, absolutely.
And we've all seen that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the beginner stage, most of us are going to be limited by skill, balance, motor control, all that type of thing. So what you think is an RPE9 is not really an RPE9 from your muscles perspective. It's an RPE9 from your ability to stay stable and balanced, etc. Which is why like 5x5 at 80% for a beginner is probably a breeze through. 5x5 for an advanced athlete or an advanced intermediate or whatever is absolutely grueling, because 80% for them is a genuine 80% as such.
Yeah.
Whereas for that beginner, it's 80% of what they can stabilize and move with right now.
Right. Which may be a true 20%.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as movement goes. Mm-hmm. We've all been young teenagers before, and we've all definitely seen it and seen the level of clumsy, if I can use a phrase like that. But the level of clumsy we all have, and it doesn't matter what level of athlete you may turn out to be, that stage in our development is just, it's
inevitable.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best performing athletes are the clumsiest ones to start with. It's really hard to tell sometimes at that point. Like a lot of the times, the best performing athletes aren't necessarily like the natural best movers. They become really good compensators.
Usually aren't the best in the weight room either.
No, exactly right. That's it. They are incredible at compensating for movement rather than having pristine movement in the first place. And sometimes the best ones look like Bambi on ice at the beginning, and you just can't tell until they've trained for long enough to actually start unveiling what's underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, you started to say something, or did I just miss it?
No, I said about basically it really doesn't. Essentially, what I was getting at is it really doesn't matter where you start. You got to start somewhere.
Sure.
But I think it's hard to just blanket statement anything, simply because even say on the RPE scale, that's going to change day to day based upon recovery, regeneration, so on and so forth, athlete attitude, athlete sleep pattern, athlete hydration pattern, athlete food patterns, athlete emotional status.
Sure.
I think we just have to find something that works and stick to that. And I think that's true. We talked a little bit earlier about, having to always change things up or, being highly adaptive. And I think that is an essential piece of what this field is about, adaptability. Mm-hmm. Adaptability from the coach's standpoint, adaptability from the athlete's standpoint. Mindset, intellect, adaptability is important on both sides as well. But sometimes some of the most successful ones, and one by ones I mean coaches, are the ones that have a standard philosophy that they follow with every single person and they don't change it. Sometimes it's just a matter of just making people work.
Sure, absolutely. And
so long
getting
as they're moving well, right? As long as they're not moving with dysfunction or significant dysfunction that's going to cause a problem, just move. Do something, absolutely. And you will likely be better. But back to what you were asking, what I said was that not all, essentially the best athletes usually aren't the best in the weight room. And the ones that are the best in the weight room are usually the athletes that are a little less talented on the field or the court or the ice.
Sure. I mean, a lot of the time people in the weight room, they're either strong in a muscular sense or like strong in an explosive sense, right? And a lot of the times it's the more explosive lifter is usually the one that's going to be better on the field, but they're not always the ones who are moving the absolute biggest loads or even moving them in the best manner, but they are moving them the fastest most of the time. Yeah. They're usually the ones that end up doing well on the field, not the brute force inverted commas athletes.
Yeah, and then again, and that depends, if we're talking about American football, there's probably some merit to that. If we're talking about, say, rugby,
sure.
Probably quite a bit more merit to your statement there. Those bigger, broody players are going to have a totally different role and fulfill that role specifically based on their stature and their structure and their biomotor abilities that make them successful in that position, in that role. But it's I don't want to say it's a crapshoot, but it's kind of a crapshoot. I mean, just do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most successful coaches, the one thing that pretty much all of them get in common is that they get buy-in from the people they coach.
Yeah.
In that they get the lifters, the athletes, whatever, they believe in the program they're doing, either because they believe in the coach or they've seen the results that it gets or whatever it might be. But, we've all seen people get great results from programs that on paper are absolutely asinine,
Yeah, yeah.
almost.
You ask yourself, what are you doing and why?
Yeah, for sure.
But then that athlete has accepted that, and
Hmm.
they go in and they give that 100%, and they believe what they're getting out of it is real. And sometimes that power of suggestion, that mental, thing that they get from it is,
It's enough.
yeah,
Or
you
I
know,
maybe
mean,
it's just also be physiologically what they need.
sure,
yeah,
absolutely. But I think the other thing that sometimes I find it's as like a bit of a nerd myself, it's really easy to get lost in the minutiae and optimal and studies and whatever. But when you are coaching people, most of the time, if this is what like is theoretically optimal over here, and this is what they want to do, more you're going to probably spend more time over here than you are actually over there because it doesn't matter if it's 100% scientifically optimal. If they hate every workout, every moment of it,
yeah. You don't have
then
them.
the effort is they're not they're probably not going to last long enough to get the results anyway, but the effort is not going to be there to hit the threshold to actually get stimulus. Whereas if you're willing to just be pliable enough to go towards their preferences, then you're probably going to get the buy-in, you're going to get the effort, you're going to get the consistency, and lo and behold, that stuff isn't the marketable, flashy stuff, but that's what gets the results, right? And that was the other thing that I really liked about Chris's work was when he released the neurotype system, talking about psychological profiles and how a lot of the time psychological profiles and physiological profiles are kind of drawn together in that a lot of the time what you are actually kind of naturally drawn towards in training a lot of the time tends to be what you also are good at and get good results from. And
Yeah,
I really enjoyed learning that system and integrating that with people because like I said, there is no one size fits all approach or whatever. And when you can look at people from a psychological perspective and say, okay, well, these are the type of training methods that you're probably going to enjoy and work hard at. Let's base a program that is scientifically sound around those preferences. Then you get the buy-in and the solid programming, and they enjoy the process, which obviously makes the whole coaching endeavor just a breeze by comparison, as opposed to trying to push someone up a hill all the time.
yeah. The one of the things that throughout my years of doing this that I realized is that as coaches, we tend to first look at the demands of the event, sport, activity, whatever we're doing. We look at what does it take to be able to do this. Then we look at the needs of the individual, but sometimes we leave off the desire. What
Sure.
does that individual want to do? Well, now we may ask them, "What are you trying to accomplish?" That's a pretty standard question, and they'll say, "I want to get faster. I want to get stronger." That's a pretty standard answer. But what do they really want?
Sure.
What are they trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And
And,
if
there's a lot of different ways to achieve those two goals
right
as,
when
as
we
well,
yeah, I'm sorry,
No, no.
but
So it's like, that person may enjoy, like, some people are training addicts, do you know what I mean? And you have to work around that. Like, some people like to do something every day. And if you don't give them something to do every day, well, then guess what's going to happen? They're going to be in there anyway. doing
yeah, yeah,
So, like, maybe that person is like, well, okay, here's your 6 weekly 40-minute workouts or whatever, which something which you may never give to someone else. But in this context, it gives the best outcome for them in terms of getting stronger, faster, whatever it might be. Because at the end of the day, their adherence to it is going to be like 90% plus of the battle. So sometimes
yeah.
you even have to kind of bend your own will, desires and principles a little bit, because at the end of the day, your job is to get them results. That it's not to please your own biases. So if you have a way of achieving that, then that's what you should do.
Oftentimes we ask, you know, people who are at the stage of their careers, like yourself, or further. I call you veterans, and right in the meat of your career at the 15-year mark. We ask, hey, what would you advise to someone coming in? That sounded like a piece of
Hmm.
advice for someone, a year in, just coming out of university,
Sure.
or whatever, and they know all that they need to know until they don't know.
Sure. I mean, you've got I can't remember what the graph is called or whatever, right? Where it's like you've got this bit of knowledge, but your assumed knowledge is up here, and then
Yeah.
there's the fall that comes where
Yeah.
you realize you do because you now know how much you don't know, and I
Right.
think
Right.
that is a really key part that every coach has to get to, is that no coach ever knows everything, and you can always learn from other coaches, and it might be one tiny little sentence, one tiny little gem of wisdom, but it can also come from the most obscure different places. Like a lot of what I use to teach athletes how to breathe and brace when they're lifting is from martial arts and yoga and all this type of thing. And there's going to be coaches in every different field that may seem completely separate to you, that have an understanding of the human body that you do not. Because at the end of the day, that is what all of us are. All of us are here to try and manipulate the human body to get a certain outcome. For some of us it's medicinal, for some of us it's for performance, but we're all working with the same system. We're all trying to understand this massively complex machine together,
Right.
and really just kind of scratching the surface still. And while you certainly cannot be a master of everything, you can be open to learning gems of wisdom from everywhere. So, never.
And should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're talking to an osteopath, a physical therapist, a pitching coach, or whatever it might be, always go in with a completely open mind, because for all you know, they're going to come out with just one sentence that you think, oh man, I've never looked at it that way before. That could completely change how you do a certain facet of your coaching. And my other recommendation would just be that to learn as many different methodologies and principles as you can, because a bigger toolbox as a coach is just never ever a bad thing. Because the vast majority of us are not going to work with one specific clientele with one specific set purpose. Like very few of us are ever just going to be a sprinting coach at a certain level for our entire career. And even then, as we've discussed, there's big variation between athletes that you need to take into account. But most of us are going to work with people with different goals, different backgrounds, different outcomes, etc. So the bigger you can make your toolbox, then the better you are going to be able to serve all of your eventual clientele, regardless of who they may be. And I think that, again, open-mindedness to be willing to learn from people who do things totally different to you is the best approach to that. Like, one of the reasons, for example, like Dave has had me on some of the podcasts, is because my approach to training, as in being influenced by Christian and people like that, is very different and goes against his biases. And in the same way, that's good for me, because he looks at things very different to how I do, and I learn from him and he learns from me, I'd like to think. So actually purposely seeking out people who think differently to you is going to open your mind to new avenues that maybe you didn't know exist, or make you actually challenge your own beliefs. A good coach should be able to look back at stuff they were doing 5-10 years ago and go, I probably wouldn't do that now. Because we should always be evolving and learning. And we should not pretend that we have it all figured out at any point. We're all striving to, obviously, but we're never the finished article. And to pretend that we are, I think, and come out, like you say, in that first year thinking you know everything is just a recipe for disaster, unfortunately.
I'm gonna tell you, the first year, the 15th year, like yourself or beyond, and then the 30 plus year, I still don't know everything. At 30 plus years, I don't know. Listen, I know I can name more things that I don't know than I do know,
For sure.
and in detail. I'm not going to go into it now, but I think that makes me a little more receptive to what you guys are talking about now, and I can see the evolution of the field, the profession, and I can see the evolution in the methodology. Although there's a whole lot of similarity to what we did in 1997.
For sure.
There's a whole lot of similarity in the style, but it's not the same. There's some small differences that I think are critical and are important to why guys are successful today. So, and
Sure.
Chris and I allude to this in our conversations a lot. The profession, while it has evolved, has it grown in a sense of the level of respect for the individual coach? So
That's a good question.
Your thoughts on that?
That's a good one. I think now more than ever, unfortunately, because we live in like a social media driven generation and all that, the people who are doing the hard work in the trenches, for want of a better way of putting it, I'm sorry,
Right? No,
are,
you're good.
are still not getting the recognition that they should get. You know, the people who are just churning out solid, good results with groups of athletes or whoever, week in, week out, month out, are not getting the respect they deserve because now we live in a society where polarization and nuance gets a disproportional amount of the spotlight. And I think,
Okay.
I don't think I don't think any of us have the answer to how we go about changing that, unfortunately.
Not yet.
But like you said, stuff has changed since say 1997, but 80 to 90% also hasn't. And all the good coaches have been doing the 80 to 90% for 10, 20, 30 years or whatever, and then adapting the 5 or 10% as research changes, experience changes, and whatever. But unfortunately, that's not flashy. That doesn't sell. You know, that doesn't get them to buy your eight shredded in 8 week program or whatever it is, if you know what I mean. So I
Right.
think, unfortunately, as with almost everything in society, the real important stuff, the real big rocks, are just not sexy. And the coaches who are focusing on the big rocks are the ones who are getting the meaningful results in many cases. But again, they're the ones that are just floating under the spotlight, and unfortunately are probably only going to be known by other coaches because they're not the ones who are willing to sacrifice their morals, their principles to make something flashy enough to grab the attention.
They're not the content creators.
Precisely.
And when we really when we started the podcast, and when I started way back when, and you know, I started around the same time. Well, I didn't start, but I was coming out a little bit. You know, when social media was starting to take hold, I wasn't interested in it, not
Don't
at
blame
all.
you.
But from a business perspective, it set me behind
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
because there's guys I came out with that sat in seminars I was giving and I was teaching, but their authority jumped over mine because they created more content.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So they were seen more by. And I'm not saying their authority from from an academic standpoint or professional standpoint or any of that. I'm just saying, you know, when you're talking about marketing, they were seen more than me, so they were seen to be better than me.
Yeah, of course.
While in a lot of cases, I taught them. You understand what I mean?
Oh, I'm
So
painfully
so
aware.
so and I kind of figured you might be, but and I you know I don't begrudge anybody, you know, being successful or making money or doing anything. I don't begrudge any of that. I'm just saying that's how kind of the from a professional sense, some of us got in the background because we've always just kind of worked behind the
Sure.
scenes, and we were okay with that, and we didn't mind
Sure.
being behind the scenes until
Well,
it starts hurting your business.
yeah, I mean that's one of the downsides of
Right,
finding fulfillment and loving what you do
right,
is that you're willing to exist in the shadows a bit and not get
right.
because the people you work with are getting what they want, and that's what gives you
Exactly,
fulfillment, right? So you
exactly,
don't feel the need to chase the spotlight because your reward mechanism is them getting what they want. Unfortunately, that doesn't grab attention, you know, whereas maybe those who are in it specifically to make money, their end goal is get seen.
right.
They're always
So,
going to beat you in that regard, unfortunately, then, aren't they?
having
Or the
learned from
motivation's
that,
different. That's all.
True.
you know,
It's
having
a
learned
totally
from
different
that
motivation.
it's the same way with this podcast. While we have been successful for 7 years, really closer to 9, but we don't count those first couple of years because we were terrible. I was terrible specifically without Chris to start off with. Then because I was a little hard headed, and I'm perfectly professional enough and everything enough. He was telling me, but I wasn't hearing. It's not that I wasn't listening. I wasn't hearing what he was saying. And then I said, "Oh, we got to be on social media." He gave me He gave me that okay, old dude. I've been mentioning that for like the last 7 months. I'm so
Yeah.
okay. Let's start social media. Yeah, let's great idea. You'll know it wasn't.
Glad I came up with that idea.
So it's as we've moved along into where we are now, and we've been pretty successful on one side, not as successful as we want to be on the other side. But it goes back to the content and the social media thing. We're so we're trying to run catch up.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a lot of podcasts out there, and I listen to them and I go, okay, that's pretty good, but we've been saying that for 3 years.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
you know
my
what I
wife
mean?
Naomi recently took over the social media for Elite ETS. So we're getting a very kind of strong look behind the curtain at how whimsical, old and flimsy all of this stuff is, man.
Yeah.
You need like a degree to keep up with the different algorithms that change every month, and
a full-time
it's wild, because you can, well, 1 minute it's like, oh, it's all about how often you post. It doesn't even matter what you post or how much and then it's all about different, like how many shares does it get or whatever, and it's like at no point does the quality of the content actually ever appear in the conversation at any point. And
it's like this.
They
They give you that thing. They will say, "Well, hey, can we say it like this?" No, that's not what I said.
Yeah,
You
and
can't
it's
say it
usually
like that
the
'cause
snapshots that are either completely polarized and taking stuff out of context or are just stupid are the ones that just go off the charts.
Yeah.
And you're like, you've taken that one little tidbit out of what was actually a really meaningful, educational conversation, and you've seen that bit. And it's just like, it just makes you want to shed a tear sometimes, unfortunately.
So our podcast was put together for guys like us to be able to turn it on and listen to. Say, well, what's Tom talking about this week? Well, who do they have on? So that we can go. And we welcome everybody from athletes to educators to, academics and researchers. And so we talk to everybody that has anything to do with performance. But our true audience are us.
Yeah.
Because, now if you're just now coming into the profession, you can tune in to episode whatever this is going to be and listen to Tom talk about what it was like when he was in the profession, what he needed to do, and see how that can help you.
For sure. And that's how you create a genuine product, in my opinion. It's like, it is almost making it for yourself in a way, but knowing that there are a lot of people out there that need the same information, not the flashy gimmicky stuff, but people who genuinely need, like, thinking back, like, if I was just that first year in the gym or whatever, like, what would I want to be listening to get better? And that's I like to think that's how you create a genuinely helpful product.
But then it's always great to have guys on and like yourself, you're about the same in your career, evolution and timing as where Chris is. We have older professionals on a lot of times, and where we're trying to get better is to get a little bit younger perspective. And just recently I had a young lady on. She had her first athletic training job, and she's in her 5th or 6th year or whatever it is. And wow, she that was a great conversation. And one of the conversations I'll go back to and tell her to listen to is this one, because it almost matches up, and it almost matches up from a perspective of, hey, this is where you are professionally in this profession, and I hear a lot of the things that she talked about from you, but I can see the complete different perspective. You're talking about it from over here because you've already come through it and you see it, and I'm sure Chris gets that too from where you are. For me, I'm long since removed from being fresh out the door. I'm stale, man. So for me, I say to guys in where I am, hey, go back, listen to her, see what she's asking about and talking about, so that when they walk in the door, if you're the director or if you're a emeritus professor somewhere or whatever, what's on their mind. Because if you don't know who you're talking to, forget about getting any results, and that goes for the gym, the classroom, or wherever.
True.
So,
I think
so
kind of just going back to your point there with like advice through your career and stuff. I mean, no one is worse at probably self-advertising and stuff than I am. So in that regard,
maybe us.
yeah. So I'm not a good person to live. But the one thing that I've always been able to do, at least I can say this, is that I've always given as much effort as I can to every person that I work with, as in, whatever the best of my knowledge base was at that time, I gave them every bit that I had. And because I genuinely wanted them to succeed. And, when eventually, if that led to me being in this scenario, which I'm very lucky to be in, fantastic. If it meant I was still in a commercial gym, PTing people day to day, so be it. But at the end of every single day, and this is going to sound like kind of philosophical, whatever, but
It's all right.
I could look in the mirror at the end of the day and just say, I'm doing something I find fulfilling, and I'm doing it to the best of my ability to genuinely help people. And I just will keep moving forward with the belief that that will lead to good things eventually if I do that for long enough. And I think for every coach, if not everyone's going to take different paths and everyone's got different end goals, but you still need to be able to say that to yourself regardless of what your end goal is, in my opinion. You have to be true to yourself and who you are as a person and be doing something you find genuinely fulfilling. And if you're doing that to the best of your ability, then I would like to think invariably if you do it for long enough, you end up somewhere good.
That's been my philosophy, so I agree with you 100% on that.
So let's take that. And what about that professional? And let me ask the question like this: do you think the profession needs to pay a little bit more attention to the survival of coaches from a financial perspective?
Yes. Although what the industry can do is questionable, right? Because I mean, most of us are in a scenario now where most of our work as coaches is probably going to be online for a lot of people because that's where the market is. But the very basis of an online model is kind of broken from the start, right? So let's just say, for example, a coach can charge $200, $250, $300 or whatever for like an online consult, like a 1 hour consult, whatever it might be. But then how many hours does it take you to coach someone appropriately, to the kind of level that we would all be happy with in terms of our input? How many hours a month do you spend coaching a person if you want to do that type of quality job, right? It's going to be quite a few hours per month, but you can't scale that same price point at all. I know they're different services, but you get what I'm saying, right? You get to a point where if you're a genuinely good coach, when I say good, I don't necessarily mean you're super advanced. I just mean you're someone who cares enough to put the time in to genuinely coach people, as opposed to write a program for someone. Those are very different entities. You either basically are left with the option of pricing yourself out of the market in a lot of cases, or you have to vastly undercharge just to stay competitive with the market, right? So, if you're charging people, I don't know, whatever, $150 a month, say, for coaching, but how many hours are you spending with that person? And then you divide that down to an hourly rate and how many clients you have to work with to create the kind of revenue that you can live off and things like that.
It's not a living wage.
It creates a broken system from the very start, you know what I mean? So I don't know what the industry can do as such, because the problem is we're all competing with things like, I'm not bad mouthing any of these things because they're different services, but you got things like Train Heroic where people can like pay $30 or $20 or whatever and get their program every month, or they're buying like the 12-week Get Shredded programs for $50 from whoever on Instagram. Those are the flashy ones, as we've already discussed. Those are the flashy ones that are getting all the attention. So they're thinking, well, if I can get that for $50 and that's the one that's being posted to me and, I assume it's then good, why would I pay quadruple that for 1 month of a coach's time? And so
I mean, that's a lack of knowledge, but
it is, absolutely.
It's not even the competitor. That person seeking that type of service that is service, not surface, is not looking for something that is personally tailored for them. They're just looking for the quick fix. They're not going to likely follow through with it. They're going to do it for a few days, weeks, sessions, and then they're going to be done with it. That's a money grab. That's no different than a gym membership.
Sure.
They took that gym membership model of all the big box gyms and they said, look, we can do this and we can make money, and some people will stick with us, most people won't, but we'll get that initial hit. They probably won't say anything bad about us other than we didn't have time to do it.
Sure.
Our biggest problem is personal trainers.
Yeah.
And athletic trainers.
Sure.
And physical therapists. That's our biggest
sure.
problem.
I think the point, sorry, maybe the point I was trying to make that I didn't make very well is that it still it skews people's perceptions of what coaching is maybe worth, if that makes sense. You know, like they don't understand what goes into personalizing programming, how much expertise and stuff that takes, because to them, if this is worth just $50 over here, how is this worth quadruple? Right. In like a relative sense. And I get you, like in the athletic performance world, it's even worse. You know, you got people who are churning out, you know, hundreds of athletes who are working with so many groups back to back every day, and the wage structure is abysmal. And man, I wish I had an answer to help fix that, because you know there are so many people who are toiling away for what works out to be a pittance of a wage on an hourly basis, you know, and the reason they're there is because they love what they do, and you know, as soon as that goes, there's nothing, and then you end up losing genuinely hardworking, caring coaches because they simply can't afford to slog away at a job anymore that just doesn't even pay the bills. You know, when you're looking at it thinking I could earn more per hour, like working in the Amazon Prime warehouse and not work 60 hours a week, or, you know, whatever the situation might be, there's only so long you can justify doing that because you love it before you think, well, I've just got bills and a family or whatever. And I just think that in general, there's an undervalue or a misconception about how much a strength coach or a performance coach or even a trainer, how much they genuinely have to offer in terms of value to a person's training experience. And I think that probably underpins the whole problem. You know, I'm sure you've all seen instances where, you know, certain teams, for example, are not doing very well, or they've got terrible injury rates and that type of thing. They hire one good strength coach, and within the next couple of years, the whole program changes. And I'm not saying that's super common, but what I'm saying is it's possible for a single coach to have that much of a pronounced effect on a whole structure, whether it could be multiple teams, which is not something you can say for like an offensive coach. Like they're only going to affect that subset population, whereas you might have two strength coaches that are working with 6 or 7 different sports athletes. So they can influence all of those in a very positive manner. So how do you quantify that? Because that's a huge possible payoff, you know. But I just think it's just generally undervalued. They will always see that offensive coach and the tactics as a more direct payoff because you can see it. Like, oh, he designed that play and it worked. Whereas the stuff we do is slow, delayed reward. So how do you prove it?
Well,
it's very difficult.
On-field performance and testing. There's so much testing out there, and there's so much technology out there that we can prove what's working and what's not working for each individual.
But then they have to value the results of those tests, don't they? And if they
the results first, they have to say what they mean them to say, right? And then if they do, then the onus relies upon the performance staff to make sure that upper management and the coaching staff then understand what the underpinnings are, understand what the outcomes mean, and, you know, provide a true derivative of success. Okay, this is what we did. This is why we've been more successful. And the largest thing that we generally see change is injury rate. Injury rate decreases, right? And they usually attribute that more to the performance staff, specifically the strength and conditioning staff, more so than they do, say, the rehabilitative staff. Because they feel that, I think in many cases, that athletes have become more resilient. So a more resilient athlete is going to recover faster. A more resilient athlete is going to be more coordinated, more controlled, so on and so forth. So that then lessens the likelihood of potential injury occurring because they can then use the brain to focus on those attributes instead of trying to use the brain to send the signals to the muscles that aren't getting there in the first place because they're stuck on the 405 at 5 p.m.
Yeah, oh, that's a good point. I just think that, at least with a lot of the coaches that I speak to who are kind of in that scenario, it's that the people who are making the decisions are maybe, let's call it old school, whatever it might be, and just haven't come around to the value of what they do yet. You know, it's almost like they've hired a strength coach under duress, and they're kind of there because they have to be there.
Yeah, we really don't need you.
Yeah, you're just here because I have a budget to spend and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or I've been told I need one.
Yeah, whereas I just think general better education, I mean, in reality, there is no excuse in truth, right? Because there's more information, education, and proof, research out there now than ever that all of these methods, resistance training, power training, etc., pay huge dividends. But if you want to put the blinders on and not see it, you're not going to see it. So it's a change of attitude, really, that needs to happen in those scenarios.
So let's go back just for a second because we talked about things that were happening in the industry, and I truly believe, and I've voiced this for years and years, there is a industry piece to what we do, and then there's the profession. You know what I mean? The professionals, I think, are where we can make the most difference in that group. The industry part is, hey, look, we're going to make money. This is where we're going to do it. This is going to be the priority. We're going to sell these things. We're going to sell these types of workouts. We're going to yada, 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 yada. But everything is focused towards the marketing. The professional side is focused towards how do we get better?
Yes.
How do individuals get better? How do, all those things that you guys just outlined fabulously. But also what I think is important on the professional side is what we've tried to allude to is, and what we've been talking about is how do we get to a living wage? We're not asking for, and I think it's, for me at my stage in the game, it's important for me to advocate for those guys coming in now, more understanding for you guys, meaning, hey, look, you need a staff. You can't hire Chris and offering, let's say we're going to hire Chris at $80,000 a year, right? But you're going to expect him to do 725 athletes all by himself from 6 different sports. And then you're going to be mad if it doesn't get better. Well, that's impossible.
If you put that forward in any other context, though, professionally, people would laugh at you, right? Like if you said, we're going to hire one guy to do the marketing for 9 different companies or projects, they'd go, well, that's stupid. That's never going to work, right? But in this context, all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, sure, you can do that.
Yeah. Chris can handle 8 teams and 755 kids. But that's
because and again, I think at that level, the understanding is that they're all just athletes, right? They're all the same. It doesn't matter that this is an ice hockey team, this is a basketball team. They're all just athletes.
You're just training them, right? You're just training.
Chris has got a You've got a spreadsheet, Chris, right? That's what you need, isn't it? Like, never mind the fact that all of those sports have different roles and then different individuals in each of the. And again, I think that baseline understanding of, these are 7 or 8 different jobs. They are not. It's not just S and C coach. It is. There's different programs for each one, and then in a perfect world, right, we'd have individualized programs for every athlete. At the end if infinite time existed, that's what we'd all do. But again, I think at that decision making level, they're just going to look at it and be like, yeah, they all just lift weights, they pick them up, they put them down. Hopefully by the end of the season, they pick up slightly more weight and put it down, and then he's done his job right.
Here's what a lot of times happens, and I in discussions with people at the stage in their career that I'm at, and I hear this sometimes. Chris needs some help. Okay, we'll get an athletic trainer in there. We'll get them certified. Well, that athletic trainer, either the one you're going to hire because you don't have one, or the one that's there, you're going to get them certified with a CSCS, right? But they already have a full-time job, which is being the athletic trainer. Well, we'll get this we'll get a sports science guy in there. They'll help with strength conditioning. Well, that's a full-time job. So what you're doing is you're not understanding that the athletic trainer, sports science individual, the strength conditioning coach, the nutritionist, sports psychologist, they're all different. They're all different full-time jobs.
Yeah, and exactly. Again, if we took this to any other context, like let's say we were filming a TV series for Netflix, you wouldn't have the guy who's cooking the food, the chef, cooking for all the actors and the workers, also creating the set and behind the camera and doing,
Right.
do you know what I mean? But like being a sports psychologist is as different as being the coach in the weight room. Do you know what I mean? They are equally as different, but again, they all just get shoved under this umbrella S&C, which it's a term we all understand, but I think it's a term that's almost a knife in our back in a way, because it's just like, oh, you're an S&C coach. That involves everything. You can cover everything with
so
every
we
athlete.
put another ambiguous term on top of that, and we say, oh well, this is our performance department. Well, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
It's the performance department, but you have one person in this department that is supposed to be in charge of 6 other things, but they're not supposed to do 6 other things. But we think, well, they can be the strength coach. He's the performance director. He can be the strength coach, the nutrition coach, the physical therapist. I'm like, we have to get past the one size fits all for the profession.
Sure, and I mean, Christian said this to me once, and it rang very true with me. In that he said, even as a coach yourself, you can never ever claim to be like a true expert in training and nutrition, because either of those take a lifetime,
Right.
and you don't have 2 lifetimes. So like even as a strength coach, you have to just, if you really want to be the best one you can, which we obviously presume is what our employers would want us to do, that has to be our entire entity. And if we want to be as good, like you can't be an expert in other things at the same. The word expert almost by definition kind of means that you can't be in multiple things at
Right.
once. If you get what I'm saying. So
You can specialize.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's just
But-
a bad default word.
Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I just think that whether it's just a deep kind of subconscious underlying assumption of value, where it's like, yes, okay, we'll have a performance department, but because we don't see it as that important, it's okay if Chris does all of it and does 6 jobs to a mediocre level, because I don't really think it's going to do anything anyway.
It's not important.
Yeah, do you understand what I mean? Whereas
Yeah.
if I truly saw the value in a nutritionist and a sports psychologist and a weightlifting coach and a speed coach or whatever, I would want all of those things to be done to the best way possible. And I would know that one person cannot do for all of those things possible. So again, I just think, sadly, a lot of it still comes back to just a general subconscious undervaluing of what a whole performance department, let's go with that role, has to offer in this context, unfortunately. And I don't know how we go about that, because I would like to think there's enough coaches out there that have made enough of a difference in enough teams over years now that if you really wanted to look for it, there's a plethora of evidence.
Well,
But
I think there's a whole bunch of evidence, as you say. One of the things, and again, we brought this up on this show before, and we brought this up at the source on this show. We don't have, as a performance entity, and the strength and conditioning is kind of taking on the kind of lead role in performance. But as a performance entity, we don't have a governing body. We don't have anyone who has taken over the role of saying, okay, this if you want to be a performance director, this is what you need.
sure.
And you can come from these fields. And you can specialize here. Medicine has a governing body.
Yeah.
And you can be an administrator in medicine, but you could also be a former, brain surgeon or a former whatever. As long as you got that administrative, those administrative building blocks and foundation, you can move into a lead role. We don't have that's why professionally, I think that, you know, our governing body needs to step to the front or step down.
Yeah, rather than do the job badly, do
Yeah,
it not,
you know,
and let something else take its place.
yeah, let you know, put a pyramid over top of yourself. Advocate for that. If what you want to be, and I'm purposely not shooting out names of organizations right now, because I don't want. That's not my point of doing this. My point is somebody's got to lead. Somebody's got to lead. Athletic training, they have their governing body. Physical therapy, they have a governing body. Medicine has a governing body. Nutrition has a governing body. Performance or strength and conditioning. Strength and conditioning has taken the lead role, but we don't want to assume to the top and take on the well, we're doing some of that because we're advocating and we're pushing, education. So I'm going to say that. I don't want to get too much into it because I'm not trying to put an organization out there. Okay, so we're saying that there needs to be an education to be able to do strength conditioning. Well, hell yes, that's always been the case. Okay, but we had to get.
Well, it
past...
hasn't always been the case. It's always been something that you and I have said.
Okay, well, it's always been the case.
It's not actually the case. You have to have a education, not
Yeah.
an education in a related field.
Right, I got you. But from our perspective, that's always been the case.
Yes.
Well, I'll say it that way. So professionally, I think that solves a lot. I mean, when NADA took over, athletic training, first thing they said is everybody's not an athletic trainer. You can only call yourself an athletic trainer with this. So why does everybody get to say I'm a strength coach, whether they have a certification or not?
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, for sure. And I think if you scale that back, like wider lens to like Gen Pop, if you let that go on for too long, then you're going to end up what we see in Gen Pop. Maybe not the exact same representation, but we've all seen the Instagram booty coaches or people who do one show and then claim to be a bodybuilding coach. And do you know what I mean? The people who have absolutely no certification, no formal education, maybe just have photo shoot photos.
But somehow they get attached to a well-known athlete who is going to be successful with or without them.
Sure.
And then they jump on that athlete's success.
Sure.
And ride that to a level. And the issue is all over the internet, you see the flaws. You see poor movement. You see bad lifting technique. You hear information and you go, what resource did they get that from? Or you ask a question like I have before, not recently. Can you send me a list of your citations where you cited this information from so I can look it up? Well, I just heard about it. Well,
that's why I say that'll get you blocked real fast. You know what I mean? If there's not some kind of structure that's brought in the S&C side, what is to stop something similar happening there? Like now a strength coach is just getting a job because they've maybe even just looked at his Instagram profile and seen he's got a load of guys with great vertical jumps and been like, oh, this guy knows his stuff. There you go. Great. Yeah, and now someone with a genuine education and background is there getting looked over because he's got a better pro. Like that could seriously start happening,
Here's what I like. They don't see the 22 guys or the 22 athletes, guys or girls that have been injured that can be directly related back to this individual person.
Yep.
They only see the 4 or 5 that have been successful.
Sure. And
they don't show them. They don't show them making corrections or instructing on the Instagram. They only show the guys that went through the exercise and did it to their mind well. So
the other struggle piece is the interview process isn't great either. I mean,
tell our audience what you mean by that, Chris.
We all have we not all been asked a question similar to, hey, what would you do with this male athlete? He's 22 years old and he's having a hard time landing on his left leg. you haven't given me enough context.
Yeah, I
He's
need more
22 years
information.
old. Great. He identifies as male. Great. Fantastic. Can't land on his left leg.
Could be in a
Injury?
cast.
Are you going to tell me about that? What sport does he play? How many years has he been training?
Yeah.
What kind of answer are you actually looking for? You're looking for an answer that you already have in your head,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
but you're not giving the interviewee an opportunity to answer that correctly. You're just hoping that they give you what you want to hear because they don't really know how to interview in the first place.
I was about to say, in that scenario, do you not think the root problem there is that the powers that be that are doing the interviews know so little, they don't even know what questions to ask?
I would argue against that. I've been
Okay.
interviewed by those that have quite extensive experience in the field and have asked terrible questions.
Wow. Okay. Well, in that scenario,
They
you
don't
can't
really
even-
help you to understand who I am or
Right.
what I can help you with or
I'm
what
gonna,
you're actually looking for, what your philosophies are. Because philosophically, if we don't align, that's okay, like we were talking about earlier. But from a principles standpoint, hopefully we align.
Sure.
But if I don't understand your principles, how can I really answer a question in the first place? So you're just feeding me. It's like you're throwing out chum and expecting me to survive in the ocean. It's just not going to
there's
happen.
a level of lazy to that. Chris.
I don't even know if it's lazy as much as it is
Apathy.
I don't even know if it's that. I think it's that more than anything, they just okay. So none of us took any courses in interviewing. So as strength coaches, should we really be interviewing other candidates?
It's a very good question.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Not.
Probably not. I mean, unless you have an extensive experience interviewing, probably shouldn't be interviewing other candidates. You know,
Sure.
it's not practical. Performance director, sure. The head of performance, sure, because those people deal with humans. Now, ironically, we deal with humans on a daily basis, so it really shouldn't be a problem asking questions. But I think coming back to what the statements that you guys have already made, there's some naivete there. You will mention a lack of empathy. I'm not sure that it's empathetic as much as it is. They just don't. They don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, they're basically, most of them are just going off of the same stuff that they were asked.
Sure.
You know, so it makes it very difficult to break in the field unless you're a yes person.
Sure. Because you can't even give a true representation of yourself if you're not asked the right questions, and
Correct.
or even
And
if
that's
the
what you
people
should be doing
interviewing
anyway.
you don't know what to look for, even.
Exactly. You should be, as an interviewer, you should be looking for the best direct representation of that person. And as an interviewee, you should be looking for someone that's going to seek your best representation.
But when you
Because
get
if they don't, you don't want to work for them. You really don't want to work for them. You're going to regret it later. It might sound like a great job, and on paper it might be a great job, and it might even pay well. But culture and team is everything. And the team isn't just the team that goes out on the field, as we were talking about earlier. The team is the coaching staff. The team is the rehabilitative staff. The team is the performance staff. You know, our team as the performance staff, we need to get along. We don't need to agree all the time. We need to get along.
in fact, we shouldn't agree all the time.
We shouldn't agree all the time, right? We should sit down at a round table and have arguments.
Sure.
Constructive, healthy arguments, for sure. That, as you mentioned earlier, lead to productivity improvements and maybe somewhat of an awakening. I think that's important.
Sure.
Or even just better perspective of where, say, you come from philosophically. Why do you actually believe that? If I'm not asking you the whys, I really don't care. And if I don't care, why am I here?
Sure.
So, Tom, let's as we move forward here, we are up on our time, but we're not going yet because
Sure.
I want to know. I had a question in my head, but the old man in me jumped to the front, so I forgot it. Yeah. Let's talk about where you go next and your book, books. You got 2, 3?
So the one that's already released with Christian, the Overload System for Strength, I mentioned earlier. I'm also working on a solo project with Human Kinetics right now as well,
Okay.
which is basically a guide to writing individualized training programs. So basically, the first third to half of the book is about kind of general athlete assessment, lifter assessment, and then basically making the steps then of not just how do you do the assessment, but how do you use the information that you get from the assessment and apply it to making programs that are, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of talk about how to do an assessment, there's a lot of talk about programming, but there's very little talk about what meshes together. Like, when you have this information, what does this actually mean for the program? How do I apply that? So the goal of the book is to essentially try and cover that gap better for individuals. So the idea is that the first kind of third to half of the book creates an athlete profile with like muscle dominances, body proportions, fiber ratios, that type of thing, weak points, sticking points. And then as you move through the methods side of the book, then it basically lists all the methods, but then in which scenarios would these methods be more or less suitable based on the results of the athlete assessment is essentially the goal. So that's hopefully going to be finished next kind of summer, spring. And then also Christian, I, and several others are working together on a book, again, for human kinetics for the OCTF system, so the Omni Contraction System, where basically it's about its application in different sports. So Christian is going to write the main section about how he developed the system, for example, and the kind of general science. And then I'm doing a section on using it with strength athletes, so like powerlifters, competitive strongmen, that type of thing. And then we've got Alan Bishop doing a section on basketball. I believe it's Reece Jones doing one on pitching coaching, using it for baseball pitchers, cricket pitchers, etc. And a couple of others as well, who, sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, who are all going to write their own individual chapters or sections about how they've taken this system and used it successfully in those specific contexts.
Okay. Well, listen, we're going to be looking for that. We'll tell everybody knows about the book you have with Christian that's already out. We appreciate your time today, man. I know
That's a pleasure.
We went back and forth a little bit to get everything squared away, but we're gonna have you back because I think there's some more conversation to be had.
That would be a pleasure. I'd love that.
So kind of look for us in the future to be, asking you what's going on, and we'll be trying to keep up. But again, appreciate your time. Appreciate you bearing with us on getting the schedule right.
Yeah, that's fine.
You have any final anything, Christopher?
This has been Performance Talk with Ewell Gordon, Chris Costa, and today's guest was Thomas Shepard. We'll see you again real soon, guys.
Thank you.
And we're